The rain poured like a curtain between the world and one man's ordinary night. Evan didn't plan to stop. He was exhausted, drenched, and already late to tuck in his son. But then he saw her, standing alone beside a broken-down car, her umbrella useless against the wind. He could have kept walking. He almost did. But something about her, her shivering hands, her defeated eyes, made him pause. "Need some help?" he asked, soaked to the bone, no expectation of thanks. She nodded without a word. What Evan didn't know was that this moment, this choice, would flip his entire world upside down. She didn't offer her name, didn't share her story. She just thanked him quietly and drove off once the car was started. By the time Evan got home, his son was already asleep. He sat in silence, peeling off wet socks, unaware that the woman he'd just helped would become the most important encounter of his life. Why was this woman really stranded in the rain? And why would she walk into his office the very next morning, wearing heels, confidence, and the title CEO? This is not just a story about kindness. It's a story about timing, fate, and the kind of full-circle moment that happens once in a lifetime. Before we meet the woman in the storm, we need to understand the man who offered her his umbrella, a man juggling 2 jobs, raising a child alone, and carrying the weight of silence like it was part of his uniform. And if you think this is just another story of struggle, wait until you see how it ends. Evan Parker wasn't always a man of quiet sacrifices. There was a time when laughter filled his home, back when his wife was alive and their son, Caleb, was too young to remember the pain that would soon define their little family. Evan lost her in a car accident. Sudden. Unforgiving. One minute he was helping Caleb tie his shoes for preschool, the next he was planning a funeral he couldn't afford. Everything changed that day. Grief didn't knock politely, it broke the door down and settled in like an unwelcome tenant. Since then, Evan had lived on autopilot. He took a job as a janitor during the night shift and worked customer service by day. Every minute was accounted for. Sleep was a luxury he barely knew anymore. He learned how to stretch a dollar, how to sew Caleb's school uniforms when they tore, and how to lie through his teeth at parent-teacher meetings when they asked if everything was okay at home. He always said, "We're doing just fine," even when they weren't. Every morning, he made pancakes in the shape of dinosaurs, even when he only had enough batter for one. Caleb always got it. Evan drank coffee and swallowed the ache. Still, he never let his son feel the weight. He wanted Caleb to believe the world was kind, even when life wasn't. Their apartment was small, just 1 bedroom, but full of love. Evan slept on the couch to give his son the only bed. Sometimes at night, he'd watch old videos of his wife reading bedtime stories. Her voice became the only lullaby that could put him to sleep. Evan didn't have time to dream. He only had time to survive. His hands were always sore. His back always hurt. And the circles under his eyes had become part of his face. But he never complained, because everything he did, every mop he pushed, every rude customer he smiled at, was for Caleb. Once, Caleb asked him, "Daddy, how come you never cry?" Evan smiled and said, "Because I'm too tired to cry, buddy." But in truth, he cried in silence, when Caleb was asleep and the apartment was quiet. Once a month, Evan would take Caleb on a big day out, usually just a park, a hot dog, and maybe a shared ice cream if tips were good. But to Caleb, it felt like Disneyland. To Evan, it was a reminder of why he kept going. He had given up on promotions, dreams, and even dating. There just wasn't time. He wore the same shoes for 3 years. He always made sure Caleb had what he needed, even if it meant Evan didn't eat dinner that night. And still, the bills piled up. Every phone call from an unknown number felt like a threat. Every envelope with a red stamp sent a jolt through his chest. But he never gave up, because love made him relentless. Evan's coworkers barely knew him. He was polite, quiet, dependable. The guy who never said no to covering a shift. But no one knew about the drawings Caleb made for him every morning, tucked into his lunch bag. Stick figures of Super Dad defeating monsters made of dollar signs. Those drawings kept him going. One Monday morning, Evan was running late. He'd barely slept 2 hours, was out of clean shirts, and had no money left until Friday. Still, he dropped Caleb off at school with a joke and a high five, just like always. He took the long walk to the bus stop, already dreading the 10-hour shift ahead. It was raining, of course. It always seemed to rain on the days when he felt most fragile. The soles of his shoes were worn through. His jacket didn't zip anymore. But he walked through the downpour with his head high, pretending the water wasn't freezing him to the core. Evan didn't know that just a few blocks away, someone else was stuck in that storm too. And the next few minutes would rewrite everything he thought he knew about fate. The rain was relentless. Cold needles stabbed through Evan's jacket as he trudged along the slick sidewalk, the city lights reflected in puddles that stretched like mirrors of his exhaustion. His shoes squished with every step, wet socks, wet shoulders, wet spirit. He crossed the intersection near the old gas station when he saw her. A woman stood beside a sleek black sedan, its hood popped open like a wounded animal. One hand held an umbrella that flipped every few seconds in the wind, the other gripped her phone with a look of pure frustration. Her coat was elegant, but soaked. Her hair, now dripping, clung to her face in long wet strands. Evan slowed down. He didn't want to. He didn't have time. His shift started in 20 minutes, and he still had a 10-minute walk, soaked through. But something told him to stop. She looked up as he approached, startled, clearly not expecting anyone to offer help in this weather. "You okay?" he asked, wiping rain from his brow. His tone was calm, kind, despite the cold drilling into his skin. The woman hesitated. "It just died. I've been waiting on roadside assistance for almost an hour." Evan peered under the hood. He wasn't a mechanic, but his father had taught him a few tricks. He fiddled with a few cables, adjusted a connection, wiped rain from his hands on his jeans, and within minutes, miraculously, the engine sputtered back to life. The woman gasped. "How did you?" "Lucky guess," he said, backing away, hands black with oil and rain. "Should be enough to get you somewhere safe." She stared at him. Not in fear or confusion, but in awe. Like she'd just witnessed something deeply unexpected. "Thank you," she said, softer now. "What's your name?" "Evan," he said simply, already turning to leave. "I'm Jane." They shook hands quickly. Hers was warm despite the cold. His was calloused, fingers rough from years of labor. They didn't linger. "You don't even know me," Jane said. "Why'd you stop?" Evan looked her in the eyes and shrugged. "Because someone once helped me. And I promised I'd pass it on." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. He walked off into the storm, soaked and late, but lighter somehow. Not from thanks, but from meaning. He had no idea who she was. Just another face in the rain. Another stranger having a bad day. Behind him, Jane sat in her car for a moment before turning the key. But the engine's growl wasn't what shook her. It was him. His humility. His quiet strength. His absolute lack of expectation. She drove off, but not without looking back. 10 minutes later, Evan arrived at his office building, the receptionist barely glancing at him as he signed in. His coat dripped onto the marble floor. The manager nodded, unimpressed by his soaked condition. Another late clock-in. Another point against him. Just another day. Evan assumed the moment had passed, like the storm slowly fading behind him. But the woman from the rain? She wasn't just a passing moment. She was the pivot point of his story. Because what Evan didn't know was that Jane wasn't stranded by coincidence. And she wasn't just another woman in need of help. She was the new CEO. And tomorrow, she was walking into that very same office, looking for the man who gave her hope in the rain. The next morning, the air inside Evan's office felt different. There was a quiet buzz, a tension. Whispers flitted between desks like wildfire. "Did you hear? Someone new's taking over. I heard she's tough." Evan, still groggy from another sleepless night, slid behind his workstation. He'd spilled coffee on his shirt on the way in, and his manager had already shot him a look that said one more mistake. He was just trying to survive the day. Then the email came. Subject, mandatory company-wide meeting, 10 a.m. sharp. No explanation. No context. Evan sighed and checked the time, 9:58. He shuffled into the conference hall with the rest of the staff. A sea of gray suits and tired eyes. No one spoke above a murmur. The door closed behind them, and that's when it happened. She walked in. Heels. Confidence. Sharp charcoal blazer. Hair tied back with precision. Jane. The woman from the rain. Evan's heart nearly stopped. For a second, he wondered if he was hallucinating. She stood at the front, adjusting the mic, cool as stone but with fire in her eyes. "Good morning," she began. "My name is Jane Kingsley, and as of this morning, I am the new CEO of this company." The room went dead silent. A few jaws dropped. Some clapped hesitantly. "Evan?" He stood frozen, hands cold, mouth slightly open, staring. Jane scanned the room, and then her eyes met his. Only for a second. But she saw him. And he saw it. Recognition. Gratitude. Power. All at once. The meeting continued. Jane outlined her vision, her expectations, and her mission to restructure the company with compassion and performance. She was sharp, articulate, commanding. But Evan heard none of it. His ears were ringing. His thoughts scrambled. That woman is the CEO? When the meeting ended, People stood up buzzing. Questions flew. Theories circled. Who was she? Where did she come from? Evan stayed seated until the room was nearly empty. Then someone tapped his shoulder. "Mr. Parker," a soft voice said. "Miss Kingsley would like a word." In her office. His stomach flipped. Inside the executive suite, everything was glass, clean, and intimidating. Jane sat at her desk, tapping her pen lightly until he walked in. She smiled. Not the CEO smile from before. A real one. "Evan," she said, "I was hoping we'd talk." He stayed by the door, unsure whether to speak or run. "You helped me yesterday. In the rain. No one else stopped. Not even when I waved them down." Evan blinked. "I didn't know who you were." "That's why it mattered," she said, standing. "You helped me like I was human. Not like I was a problem. Or someone beneath you." "I didn't do it for anything," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. "That's what makes you rare." There was a pause. Then, she reached into her desk drawer and slid over a small envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "An opportunity," Jane said. "You'll still have to earn it, but I'm giving you a real shot. Starting today." Evan opened it and read the offer inside: promotion, better hours, full benefits. For the first time in years, he felt something different than exhaustion. He felt seen. Evan didn't speak much that day. After the meeting with Jane, everything felt unreal. He walked through the office in a daze. People were gossiping about the new CEO's style, her presence, her plans, but no one knew what had just happened behind her glass doors. No one knew Evan had just been handed the first real opportunity of his life. That night, he got home before Caleb's bedtime, for once. "Daddy!" Caleb shouted, jumping into his arms. "You're early." Evan held him tighter than usual. The weight on his shoulders hadn't lifted, but for the first time, it felt shared. Like someone else believed in him. He tucked Caleb in, kissed his forehead, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the envelope Jane had given him. Inside was more than a job offer, it was validation. A position in operations, regular hours, double the pay, full health benefits. It even came with a mentorship program, led personally by Jane. The next few weeks were a blur. Jane followed through on every word. She didn't just promote Evan, she mentored him. She saw potential buried under exhaustion and slowly began to draw it out. "You've got leadership instincts," she told him one morning. "You just haven't had anyone nurture them." Evan worked harder than ever, but for the first time, it didn't feel like drowning. It felt like rising. He started coming to work early, not out of fear, but pride. He studied late into the night after Caleb was asleep, brushing up on logistics, efficiency, management theory. He watched videos, read blogs, and scribbled notes on flashcards. Jane would leave books on his desk. Notes in the margins. Encouragement scribbled in red ink. "This is where you shine. You caught something my managers missed. Great eye. Don't hold back." Other employees noticed. Some were suspicious. Others curious. But a few were inspired. They saw a man who had been invisible for years becoming someone to watch. Evan's confidence began to shift, not loudly, but in the way he held himself. The way he asked questions. The way he started to speak up in meetings. He began mentoring others, sharing small productivity hacks that had helped him stay afloat for years. Jane saw it. She encouraged it. She even invited him to shadow her during board meetings, not as an assistant, but as a future leader. One afternoon, Evan asked her, "Why me?" She smiled. "Because someone once gave me a shot when I had nothing. And I never forgot it." He tilted his head. "You?" Jane nodded. "I was homeless at 22. I slept in my car, showered in gyms, scraped by. One night, an old woman at a 24-hour diner gave me a free coffee and said, 'You're not meant to stay here. You're meant to lead.' That moment stayed with me. And when you helped me without asking for anything, I knew it was time to pay it forward again." Evan sat back, stunned. She wasn't just successful, she was forged in fire. They were, in some ways, mirrors of each other. Two people who had once stood in the rain, hopeless. Now connected by kindness, choice, and timing. At home, Caleb began to notice too. "You're smiling more," he said one night. "Am I?" Evan replied. "Yeah. You don't look tired anymore." Evan chuckled. "That's because I'm doing something that finally makes me feel alive." He started attending school events he used to miss. He cooked full dinners instead of frozen leftovers. Even Caleb's teacher sent a note home saying, "Caleb's more confident lately. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." By month's end, Evan was managing a small team. By the end of the quarter, Jane called him into her office again. "There's a director's spot opening in 6 months," she said. "If you keep this up, I'm recommending you." He almost laughed. A year ago, he was scrubbing floors and skipping meals. Now, he was building something. More importantly, he was becoming someone his son could point to and say, "My dad didn't give up." 6 months passed faster than Evan could have imagined. The director's position opened as promised. Evan applied, nervously, and Jane kept her word. She endorsed him personally, not just with words, but with data, proof, and glowing reviews from the team he now led. Evan got the job. His nameplate changed. His paycheck grew. His hours became stable. But the most important transformation couldn't be measured. He walked taller, smiled more. He started taking Caleb to the park after school without checking his watch every 5 minutes. He could breathe again, and for the first time, dream. He decorated their apartment, bought matching towels, fixed a broken curtain rod. Small things, but to Evan, it felt like taking back control. One day, Caleb drew a picture of Evan with a cape and put it on the fridge. "You're my hero," he said. Evan's voice cracked as he whispered, "You're mine." On a rainy Wednesday, the kind of weather that now meant something, Jane invited Evan to lunch. They sat at a corner booth of a cozy local restaurant, far from corporate talk, laptops, or expectations. Over warm soup and fresh bread, Jane leaned back and said, "You know, I almost didn't take this job." Evan looked up. "What changed your mind?" "You," she said simply. "I was passing through town to finalize things and got stranded." "That storm?" "I think it was more than weather. I think the universe needed me to meet you before I made my decision." He laughed. "That's a bit dramatic." "Is it?" She smiled. "Evan, I've built companies. I've worked with the brightest minds. But you reminded me why I started. You reminded me what leadership is really about." He shook his head. "I was just a guy trying to get to work." "No," she said, her voice softer now. "You were a man who stopped in the rain when no one else did." There was silence for a moment, broken only by the clink of cutlery and the hum of nearby conversation. "Do you ever think about her?" Jane asked gently. "My wife?" Evan nodded. "Every day. I think she'd be proud of who I'm becoming." "She would," Jane said. "And so would the little boy who used to watch you fight through every day without ever complaining." Evan didn't reply, but his eyes said everything. Later that evening, he and Caleb curled up on the couch, watching cartoons. A knock came at the door. It was a delivery. A small package with a note, "To the man who stopped in the rain. May your days be full of sun from now on." Inside, a set of keys. Evan stared at them, puzzled. Then, he opened the window curtain and looked outside. Parked on the curb was a gray sedan, the same make and model as the one Jane had been stranded in. Only newer, cleaner, paid in full. He picked up the phone to call her, but stopped. He knew she wouldn't want credit. Instead, he sat in silence for a moment. Let the tears come. Some gifts don't need to be repaid. They just need to be passed on. Weeks later, Evan did just that. He saw a young man at a gas station, backpack full, clothes torn, stranded. He didn't think twice. He bought him a sandwich, filled up his tank, gave him his number. Kindness wasn't about grand gestures. It was about remembering what it feels like to be seen. And Evan Parker? He would never forget. Evan Parker's story isn't about luck. It's not even about success. It's about choice, the choice to be kind when it's inconvenient, to give when no one's watching, and to keep going when everything feels stacked against you. He didn't have money. He didn't have influence. What he had was heart. And that was enough to change his life and someone else's. From janitor to director, from surviving to thriving, from being invisible to being unforgettable. But here's the truth, there are Evans everywhere. People working 2 jobs, raising kids, carrying silent grief, and still showing up with compassion. And there are Janes too. People with power, influence, and painful pasts, who remember where they came from and choose to lift others up. This story reminds us, we never know who we're helping. We never know what someone's going through. And we never know what a single act of kindness might become. So the next time you see someone in need, don't walk past. Don't wait for a reason. Be the reason. Because kindness doesn't cost much. But sometimes, it changes everything. And if you've ever felt like Evan, tired, stuck, invisible, know this, you matter. You're seen. And your story isn't over yet. If this story moved you even a little, if it reminded you of the power we each hold to make a difference, share this video with someone who needs it. Drop a comment below and tell us what part hit you the hardest. And don't forget to subscribe, because we share powerful stories like this every week, and we don't want you to miss a single one. Thank you for watching. And remember, the rain always stops, but kindness, that lasts forever.